printing money is obviously inflationary also, and AI is going to be replacing tens, if not hundreds of millions of jobs. What I'm interested in is to figure out the second order, third order, fourth order effects that will come out from all this. My view is that BTC is obviously going to benefit from all this because
Murad Mahmudov, aka Must Stop Murad on X, is a top meme coin analyst and a true Bitcoiner at heart.
He's crypto's unsung meme coin Jesus, who believes that true crypto cult communities serve as neo-religions in a world of scary AI dominance.
what are the biggest markets in the world? And people say, oh, it's like food, or it's transport, or it's energy, or it's compute. But in my opinion, one of the biggest markets in the world is actually the market for reducing psychological suffering. If you succeed in building a neo-religion that has a token, these things are going to be fighting for a multi-trillion-dollar market, in my opinion.
Hey guys, welcome back to Less Noise, More Signal. Today I'm yet joined again by Murad, the one and only Murad Mahmudov. It's great to have you on the pod, Murad.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Yes, I mean, you were requested, obviously, by a lot of people again, just because you've been one of the most influential people throughout all of crypto. And it's obviously a privilege to talk to you. I mean, maybe to start off, I guess most of the people will know you, but what have you been up to lately? Can you share anything besides being in the meme coin trenches for sure, but anything else that's on your plate?
Just continuing to grind, continuing to, learn more about crypto, stay on top of the markets. Meme coins has been my main kind of priority and focus this cycle. SPX 6900 in particular. Just watching the space, working on a couple more on-chain analytics tools, working on my YouTube channel that I recently started, where I'm going to be talking about all kinds of things. So, a little bit of everything.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. And your YouTube channel, what are you planning on sharing with people there? Is it more like just your thoughts on the market, regular updates, or what you have in mind?
I don't think that doing the videos on the constant thoughts on the market are that interesting. I actually think what's more interesting is, as I'm trying to understand the world myself and where we're going, to kind of make videos that are more approachable by normal people, because I think that will be a much better way to get newer people into crypto in general, and to try to tie some of the upcoming trends in the world and how they can affect crypto markets and individual crypto assets. I think that's much more interesting than just kind of like doing TA on crypto every 48 hours. So what I like to talk about is AI and how it's going to affect, the world in the next 15 years, all kinds of growing forms of inequality around the world, the great power conflict between the US and China, and everything.
Interesting. Yeah, that's definitely some of the topics I want to address with you today as well, because these are things that I've been thinking myself about all the time. And basically, it's if you are in crypto, but then you're maybe not only a TA guy, you're exposed to what's happening in the world, and this is what we got me into Bitcoin in the first place. Because like it prompts you to reflect on what's going on in the earth or on our planet. So I might be interested to know from you, big picture, and then we can sort of zoom in. If you say that you have these thoughts as well, and you're thinking about it, yeah, what is the state of the world right now, and where are we going?
Yeah, so I actually think the three core trends that I mentioned are going to be the most important kind of super trends / topics in the next 10 to 15 years. And they're all very much connected to one another, right? So first of all, you have a competition between the great powers that's heating up, which is leading us to the second discussion, which is AI and AI race between the two countries. And the third thing, which is kind of a symptom or a byproduct of the first two, in my opinion, is widening inequality, right? And it's almost like a triangle with all three kind of affecting one another and kind of one flowing into another, etc. And what I'm interested in is to figure out the second order, third order, fourth order effects that will come out from all this, right? Ultimately, if you study the history of great power conflicts, whether it's hot wars or cold wars, they are 90% of the time over the past 500 years inflationary. Why? Because both sides usually print in order to win, right? So it's not just one side printing, it's all the sides printing in order to kind of get a leg up. They essentially tax the currency holders in order to finance the competition effort, right? Now, that's kind of the one factor that's inflationary. Second thing is the Western bloc led by United States. I think if we zoom out, their grand strategy is going to be to essentially print money in order to create AGI, right? And to print money in order to beat China to AGI creation. Why? Because, China is increasingly better than the West at all things physical and all things manufacturing, while the advantages that the United States has are predominantly in the software field, in the finance field, and in the fact that they still hold the reserve currency of the world, right? Now, if you connect those three things, essentially one obvious strategy for them to try to get a leg up is to print money in order to finance AI one way or another, right? Whether it's directly or indirectly. And essentially, everyone in the world, not just in the United States, but in Europe, Africa, South America, Asia, that holds the dollars, are going to be indirect financiers of the American AGI effort, right? And that's kind of step one. And again, we know that the great power conflicts are inflationary. Now, printing money in order to build AGI, we can break that into two parts as well: print money and AI itself, right? We know printing money is obviously inflationary also, and AI is going to be replacing tens, if not hundreds of millions of jobs. And actually, it hasn't even begun yet, really. But sooner or later, whether it's 2027 or 2032, AI is going to be replacing more and more jobs out there. Now, all three trends that I mentioned, they're essentially are going to be increasing income, wealth, and financial inequalities of all kinds, essentially everywhere in the world. And my general view on life is that humans don't really care, despite how much the capitalist or the consumer system wants us to think otherwise. Humans actually don't care about like physical objects, physical trinkets, physical wealth. But what they really care about is status. And really, they don't even care about that. That is just a currency in order for you to succeed in family formation, settling down, marrying, having children, which I ultimately consider the ultimate purpose of our existence. Now, if wealth inequality is going to radically widen in the next 15 years, as I anticipate, it is likely that fertility is going to continue dropping, family formation is going to continue dropping, because settling down and finding a partner and marrying and having children is going to be increasingly a luxury good, right? It's going to be increasingly available only to a progressively dwindling percentage of the population, which means that an increasingly large percent of the population is going to be unhappy, dissatisfied, angry, and upset. Taking that logic chain further, you have to ask yourself what's going to happen. And what's going to happen, in my opinion, is continued political radicalization, the glimpses of which we're already seeing in the United States. You're going to probably have, more intergenerational tensions. You're going to have more tensions across the political aisles. You're going to have probably more tension across all different sort of stakeholders in society. And my view is that BTC is obviously going to benefit from all this, because they are not only going to continue printing money, they're going to continue to boost liquidity in the markets, which are increasingly driving the entire economy. And essentially, I'm also obviously thinking which other assets, both inside crypto and outside of crypto, are going to benefit from essentially everything that I've discussed. And we can delve into that further as well, of course.
Imagine lowering your tax bill while stacking Bitcoin. With Blockware, you can. Thanks to new tax guidelines, you can write off 100% of your mining hardware costs in a single year. Blockware's mining as a service takes care of everything, so you can start mining Bitcoin effortlessly. Visit mining.blockwaresolutions.com/LNMS and get $100 off for your first miner.
Yeah, sure. I see. I want to unpack some of the things you said here, because I do agree. If you study history, yeah, wars have always been, even if it's just Cold Wars, it's been inflationary just because, yeah, as you mentioned, they need to come up with the money to pay for stuff. But I mean, the AGI and AI angle that you brought in here, I was just wondering, is it really going to be that inflationary? Because like that in and of itself is going to be a huge deflationary force in that sense. And then you have maybe the boomers, who are all, retiring, and they will be out of the workforce. And so that might also be deflationary. I mean, there's so many forces here at play that I think could kind of counteract that there's going to be inflationary forces. So I'm really wondering if we're really going down this route of falling into an highly inflationary downward spiral in that sense, or how do you see that unfold?
I think the deflationary forces are more medium to long term, and the inflationary forces are more short to medium term in order to get us to that deflationary future in the first place. I agree with you that AI and technology in general are a deflationary force, but I'm afraid that what's going to happen is it's going to be deflationary in certain sections of the world and in certain markets, in certain goods, in certain commodities, but it's going to be inflationary in others, just like we've seen over the past 50 years. Real estate, education, food, they've become much more expensive while, refrigerators and computers have become cheaper, right? So it's a bit nuanced and you have to look at it from on a case by case basis. Now, actually, even before you started recording, you mentioned that, AI might get us to a point where, humans don't have to work, etc. But I like, even if everybody has, the lower ends of the Maslow's pyramid taken care of by machines, the way human psyche works, in my opinion, is it's not, and I think this is the critical point to understand. It's not about absolute levels of wealth, right? And, people often say, like a lower middle class person today has access to more amenities than the emperor had 2000 years ago, right? A very famous quote. But the of the matter is that it's not really important, because what humans care about isn't absolute levels of wealth. What they care about is their relative standing in a so-called village, right? Because, in our evolutionary history, the predominant amount of time has been spent in these like 50 to 70 people communes, so to speak. And I think the majority of our psyche has developed in that kind of context. And by that, I mean, even if nobody has to work, I think if the resulting society is one of unbelievable levels of inequality, then I think people are going to be unhappy, right? And my question is, what are they going to do? What are they going to buy? How are they going to resist this, protest this? How are they going to give their attention, their creativity? Where are all these forces going to flow, right? And I think that these are interesting questions to answer. If you can answer them correctly, you can position yourself very well for the next decade, right? And that's kind of, loosely speaking, what I'm trying to do.
Yes, and I want to get into this, but I mean, your point about envy is a very interesting point, because that's been discovered all throughout history. That people, they're not actually comparing themselves to maybe some far-fetched person which is like a billionaire, but they're comparing themselves to their neighbor. And if their neighbor is better off, then you're sort of like beaten down. Like mentally. And in that sense, I agree with you. Like, even if we had a world where we're in total abundance, and maybe because of like technology, and we've seen it throughout history in crypto and technology, everywhere there's like these laws of potency, like the power laws, where like some of get all of it, and then you have the long tail of people who kind of are just juggling along. And so even if we get this world of abundance, I mean, yeah, in that sense, people will also kind of lose meaning, because if they don't have anything to work for, to strive for, then obviously, yeah, chaos and meaninglessness, or just like an emptiness will kind of be prevalent. So it doesn't even depend on the world just going to shits in terms of material wealth and everything. It's also maybe because if we were to move in some type of super abundant world, I mean, this is not what we humans are wired for as well. So
Yeah.
I agree with you. Inequality wise, like, why do you think? I mean, you elaborated already somewhat, but why do you think inequality will even be greater? Because it is already great today, but can you maybe pin this down a little more?
Yes.
Some of the
So
driving forces?
yeah. So actually, it's been going up nonstop since 1971, which I'm sure you understand what happened that year. And right now, last year, it has reached essentially 1927 levels, which is like Great Gatsby, Fitzgerald levels, if you know what I mean. And I see no reason why this isn't going to continue, because, like you mentioned, society is going to go from winner take most to winner take all. And because AI agents, robotics, they're essentially going to suppress human wages and the value of human labor and human intelligence even more. Essentially, humans are going to become little other than commodities, unfortunately. And due to this hyper automation, a team of 10 people will be able to build $10 billion companies, right? And I'm sure in the next 3 to 6 years, we'll see a single person unicorn as well, right? Which means that the effects that you describe, the power law, it's going to become more extreme. So this is first of all, the world being more interconnected, fully plugged in, hyper online, everyone is on the smartphone, everyone is on the internet, is only going to amplify all of this without even delving into AI. Third of all, a bunch of stuff that I discussed, and I think we agreed that they are predominantly inflationary nature. I think you would agree with me that money printing and inflation overall exacerbates inequality because it benefits the rich disproportionately, because the wealthy hold the supermajority of real estate assets, the supermajority of equities, and like the top 1% owns 51% of equities in America. And I believe the top 10% own like 80% of them. And so this means that the stock market and the holdings in the stock market and BTC to some extent, I suppose, they're going to protect people who hold those assets, while wages and while wages are going to stay suppressed, right? And this is a core reason why inequality is going to grow.
Yeah, I see. I mean, very interesting as well. I want to double click on what you said in terms of like human beings are going to be commoditized, because I think that's a very interesting way to frame it. I mean, I was wondering, what will government play in all of this? Because I can only see that governments will kind of feel like they have to fodder everyone, in the sense of like, okay, no, we see this inequality is widening, and that's why we have to dash out more entitlements to people who are on the lower spectrum. And in that sense, like, more and more people will probably be clinging to this money coming from government, through redistribution, and ultimately this again will be financed by money printing in and of itself. But then this is also a very this is like it's very inhumane in that sense, because like, if you are getting your money from the government through entitlement, you might get through, because you get by, because you get enough money, but your status is shit, and you're like, your self-worth and self-esteem is also kind of like, okay, I have no purpose in this world. It had or apart from being commoditized, and I'm just a number that government is sort of allocating money to. So was wondering if you have any thoughts on this, what government's role will be going forward.
Yeah, I expect some form of UBI. I think is inevitable, but it's not an overnight thing, right? And I think the optimistic case is that the fruits of AI and automation are going to be enough to raise the GDP and economic productivity to such an extent that there are kind of sufficient economic flows for satisfactory UBI to be redistributed to kind of like the bottom 95%, so to speak. But it will take time to get there. And my thesis is, even if there will be a point of successful UBI programs and hyperabundance, it's probably like a chaotic couple of decades in between. And I think there will be both tremendous amounts of loss and tremendous amounts of opportunity during like the transitional chaotic period. And I think what I am interested in doing is figuring out what's going to happen in that chaos and kind of seeing how that chaos can benefit myself, my followers, my viewers, etc. But, it's inevitable that there should be some kind of a UBI. It will probably be the bare minimum. You know what I mean? But it's not going to be a very smooth ride, so to speak, in my opinion.
Discover the power of self-custody with Bitbox, the hardware wallet that combines privacy, precision, and world-class security. Whether you are a beginner or an advanced user, Bitbox offers user-friendly features and advanced options like coin control or optional passphrases. I have personally been using them for years, and so should you. Visit bitbox.swiss.lnms and get 5% off your first order.
You mentioned decades, because that's what I was going to ask next. Like what time frames are we talking here? Because in the beginning you also agreed that maybe further down the line, there might be a positive future, pictured and painted by AI, but in the meantime, in this transition phase, it might get ugly in your view. And so, yeah, what time frame are we talking here? Is it like decades or is it
Yeah, I mean,
years?
it's super hard to give a timeline prediction because even the most sophisticated AI researchers, they have all kinds of predictions, anywhere from as little as 2 years to as long as 30 plus. But it's in that general time frame.
Okay, yeah, I see. Well, you're right. Nobody can really tell the future and know what's coming, and so it's really hard to pinpoint a certain time frame. But I mean, you mentioned that you are trying to figure out because you mentioned there's also going to be opportunities, for people who maybe also figure out how to navigate these chaotic times. And how are you approaching this, and how do you try to think about it to figure out where the opportunities are?
Yeah, so I am increasingly of the belief that the crypto market is less driven by crypto natives and it's more driven by two other demographics. One is institutions, and two is just normal people who usually come and go, historically in periods like 2013, 2017, 2021, right? And I think that increasingly majors such as BTC, ETH, and Sol are increasingly driven by institutions, and altcoins, essentially the rest of crypto, is increasingly driven by those normal people that are either outside of crypto or only come and go occasionally. And I think that for a variety of reasons, these quote unquote normal people, they haven't really joined crypto quite as much this cycle for a couple of reasons. One is, if you follow any of the macro metrics, even though the stock market has been going up, Main Street generally has been kind of suffering for the past 2 or 3 years. Second of all, a lot of people, from a central bank point of view, we've been under a kind of a quantitative tightening regime until recently. And that historically is bad for altcoins, especially bad for altcoins in BTC terms. Third of all, and when you don't really have sustained altcoin pumps, then you don't really get rich quick stories, which usually need to start percolating across society for normal people to hear these things from their friends and co-workers to start kind of joining the space as well. Fourth of all, with the rise of launchpads such as PumpFun and a couple of others, we've gone from 100,000 coins to 17 million coins, which means that the probability of you being rugged or being scammed or the coin that you join dumping very fast has increased disproportionately as well. And so all of these forces have prevented for retail coming, right? There was a brief period where they were here based on some metrics in late 2020, 2025, when a combination of meme coins and kind of quote unquote AI agents were doing quite well. But in the grand scheme of things, this hasn't really been a retail driven cycle, right? And I think that despite QT, BTC has managed to go from K to K, mainly on the back end of ETFs and digital asset treasuries, right? Now, what I will say is, what has happened is QT is now being paused, and there are even whispers of some kind of a quasi QE coming in the coming weeks and months as well, which I think should finally be bullish for alts. A lot of people are bearish right now because we've been pretty much going sideways for the past 5-6 months. And social media people, especially crypto Twitter people, they are volatility junkies. if BTC isn't going up nonstop, they essentially are going crazy. And essentially, they are quite affected by short-term price movements. Now, you asked me, what assets do I think are going to do well because of all these AI rising and wealth inequality trends? This cycle, crypto, I would argue, has been maturing because the number of altcoins that have been outperforming BTC is much fewer in number compared to 2020, 2021. In 2024, it was only 25 coins. And in 2025, it's only like 10 to 15 coins, which in some ways is good because I think that those same 10, 15 coins that are doing well right now, or that have been generally doing well over the past 2 years, they are going to go ballistic once liquidity or retail or easy mode, whatever you want to call it, comes back into crypto market. So essentially, my goal is to figure out which altcoins have the potential of beating BTC, and we can get into that as well, of course.
Yes, but I want to double click on some of the things you said again, in terms of like retail. How do you define retail? Because to me, obviously, a lot of people who call themselves crypto natives, and that's the other definition that I like to have, is like, I guess they're still looking for retail, but in a sense, they're retail themselves, because many of them, they're not sophisticated traders. They just happen to have been in crypto for quite some time. And I agree with you, these people are ever more being put off just because their bags don't pump anymore. And that's why they're sort of also burned out over the years, and they can't take it anymore, or they've done several up and down rides of 90% plus. And that's why they kind of are burnt out, even though I think you are of the belief that this is something that you have to do and kind of have to experience to make it in crypto. And probably some of them also made it, because they have some in BTC, some in Ether, which has done well over many cycles. But how do you define retail, and why would you argue that it's not going to be driven by the crypto natives, but then by the retail, which are not in the market right now? Is it really liquidity that will bring them back, or why should they return?
Yeah. So, I mean, just think about this, right? What percentage of the world is crypto natives, let alone like full-time crypto people? Maybe 0.01% or less, right? Which means that the super majority of people out there, they aren't full-time crypto. They aren't crypto natives. They aren't people that are 8 hours a day on crypto Twitter, right? So, essentially, my goal, and I think that's kind of the dream of every person in crypto, is to experience something like XRP, Doge, Cardano, Link, these essentially sustained multi-year parabolic successes, right? And in my opinion, the only way for a coin to experience something like this is to escape the crypto Twitter bubble or the crypto native bubble, and to actually, in one way or another, reach, or better yet, touch the hearts and minds of absolutely normal people, right? That is how XRP succeeded. That is how Doge succeeded. And I would even argue that that is how BTC has succeeded back in the day. And so that's kind of been my focus, to figure out which altcoins, if any, have the highest probability of penetrating the wall that is crypto Twitter, or just the crypto native kind of bubble, and to expand further, whether it's non-crypto parts of CT, whether it's Reddit, whether it's YouTube, whether it's TikTok, whether it's just the real life offline world, which coin is going to be there on the front lines, right? And that's kind of what I've been focused on. And we can get into that as well.
Hey guys, I'm thrilled to share my new book, The Bitcoin Enlightenment, co-authored with Mexican billionaire Ricardo Salinas. Make sure you grab your copy now and learn about how one of the richest people in all of Latin America thinks about Bitcoin. You'll find the link in the show notes.
Yeah, but for sure. But again, these people coming back, because they need to hear about it. And as you say, it's probably they hear about it once the price is really pumping, and that's when they come in, and they maybe even buy in at the top, So, I mean, if crypto natives are increasingly not part of the game anymore because they don't like it anymore because their bags are also not pumping, then I guess why should the coins pump in the first place and attract these like normal people again? So that's where I have this dichotomy that I don't see.
You only need one altcoin to do a x 50x in size in order for people to start coming in, right? Because that coin is going to produce, I don't know, 100, 200, 300 people that will be kind of like proofs of rapid success. And their stories, whether online or offline, are going to percolate across society and bring people in. I don't know if you track these metrics, such as, Coinbase App Store rankings and other similar kind of like retail focused analytics kind of metrics. But in general, this has been a retail light cycle. This is the biggest reason why altcoins have underperformed. And I think that with QT ending and with a potential some form of QE beginning, I think altcoins will fare better compared to the last 2 years, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's probably one of the prerequisites for sure, because otherwise you need to have ample liquidity like we had back in the COVID years. But that's really the point, where a lot of people are arguing that was once in a lifetime opportunity. We had this pandemic that was coming along, had a lot of pent up demand because everything was closed, people were saving, there was a lot of money pushed into the economy. And when this was released, we had the 2021 run up, with all the altcoins, and this is not gonna copy itself anytime soon. And so you are of the belief that this will come around again, and for some specific reason, or is it more tied to what we argued in the beginning? It's just because the world is heating up with these powers fighting each other that they will have to do money printing, and then at some point go back to something like QE. Because last time we could argue QE is really only done if something materially breaks in the system, and if nothing breaks, then it's sort of stealth Q, which is done, which has not helped altcoins out, as we can see. So yeah.
Yeah, I get your point that the post-COVID era was like a one-off situation. But, we had 2017 as well, though admittedly on a slightly smaller scale, where altcoins have done tremendous without helicopter money, right? And so it's definitely possible. I think the bigger issue is having just a few successes and having those stories percolate across society for people to start joining en masse. And it just takes one or two coins to kind of start going viral on YouTube or Reddit or some other platform in order for something like this to be kickstarted, right? But I like the future altcoins, I agree with you, are not going to be such that everything just goes up, right? Like we had in 2017, 2021. For a variety of reasons, it's probably going to be fewer coins outperforming in general. But I think we're going to see something which I call kind of like selective alt season, where, 10 to 15 coins do exceptionally well.
Yes, that's something I can see as well. Just because, like, as you mentioned it yourself, there's now billion or like millions of altcoins out there, and so once liquidity comes back, I mean, it's still going to be diluted, because it's flowing into all these projects of people, and that's why there is the risk that none of these altcoins is going to attract enough liquidity to have this escape velocity. But you argued there will be a selected few. And why is this now? Why are there some that will be breaking out of this bubble and then kind of be able to suck in all this liquidity that's coming along? What are they doing differently than maybe the billion or the millions of projects out there?
So I think people are realizing that the whole micro cap, small cap launchpad game of creating new coins, gambling on new coins, is becoming increasingly negative EV, in the sense that the creation of new coins is gradually reaching a point where it is systematic, algorithmic, predatory, mercenary, and it's happening in a very sort of calculated, industrialized way. And I think that people are gradually understanding that the only way to win and the only way to just even be a part of something that goes to 50 billion plus, 100 billion plus, is to actually diamond hand, is to actually hold, is to actually join together, DCA together, evangelize together. And in my opinion, there are a couple of coins that have done a much better job compared to the average coin in order to instill that kind of culture and attract the right kind of people to achieve something like this. Personally, not financial advice. I'm a big fan of SPX 6900. I think it's very similar, if not better, than what we saw with GME in 2021, which essentially is people coming together online and offline in order to critique and in a way express their dissatisfaction with the traditional system and the way things are set up. And I think something like this, the emotions powering something like this, are going to accelerate and are going to intensify. And because of that, I'm essentially expecting something like GME to happen again, possibly even on a bigger scale. Because, GME only reached like 35 billion. And I think we can easily see something much bigger than that.
Yes, I mean, this is a great way of thinking about it. That's for sure. Like that. Maybe crypto's use case all along was enabling this decentralized altcoin casino. That's what we've seen. But I think this is running on its last legs. Just because, as we argued, so many people are burnt out. There's too many tokens. It's so hard to be. The bank always wins. The altcoin market always wins against you, so to say, because it's just hard to kind of gamble your way to riches, and that's why.
So I actually, I agree and disagree, and I'll explain. So
Yeah.
yes, the altcoin casino / hyper gambling is a major use case of crypto, blockchain, Web3, etc. Right? But what I believe is actually the opposite. What I believe is that in order to succeed, you need to do whatever is the opposite of gambling. Whatever
Yeah.
is the opposite of this kind of like desperate attempt to very quickly make money. Essentially, I believe that the future big winner needs to create a culture which is anti-gambling, anti-trading, anti-charting, anti-short-termism, right? And essentially, the coin needs to essentially be a revolt against gambling, right? And I think it's the opposite of what you described. That's actually the key to success, and that's what's actually going to win.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I feel like that's where you can look to Bitcoin and maybe the other altcoins that you mentioned, where you can really see they sort of fabricated this narrative, which is really has staying power, and people can really believe in something, as you say as well, every now and then, and I mean the casino thing, it was probably back in 2017. It was the first time, people actually did a lot of money by just speculating on anything. 2021 worked as well because of the COVID situation that we mentioned, but now with every iteration, you have maybe a short burst here and there where it works, but I feel like this altcoin casino thing, this is really running out of steam. It's just because people are being burned out by this. And so, yeah, the question is, okay, what is going to be the future? And as you mentioned, it could be like projects that break out of this and reach the real world, with some long-lasting narrative and then also some long-lasting connection to these people. And there, I'm just wondering, how do you do this? Because I see it from afar, with SPX 6900. I'm just only following it on the fringes. But there I can see that people are trying to do this. I just have my doubts yet that this will really be sustainable, but maybe you can fill me in. How do you, as a project, how do you get to these normies, so to say, and really
Yeah.
establish a moat?
Yeah, great question. So the way I see it, crypto in general, and I think SPX 6900 specifically, what it's trying to do is it's trying to create UBI or some kind of wealth redistribution to occur earlier, right? You said maybe 15 years from now, there will be UBI for everybody. But essentially, I think SPX 1600 is essentially people, especially young people. And by the way, Gen Z is the first generation ever, and millennials to some extent, where in many ways, their lives are harder, even in the Western world, compared to their parents, right? And historically, that's not been the case, whether you look at home ownership or wages to home price ratio, or the youth unemployment, or youth family formation, etc. All of these are lower than their own parents at their same age, right? And I think what SPX 6900 is trying to do is essentially we're trying to engineer something like GME, but much, much bigger and potentially much, much more persistent. Essentially, it's GME on steroids because it's decentralized, much more distributed. We don't have anyone that can create more shares like they can at a corporation. And the actual units of the coin are on various blockchain rails, as opposed to being in prime brokerages, right? That are essentially these tightly controlled bottlenecks. Ultimately, what we're trying to do is we're trying to create this vehicle where people come together and they combine the power of memetics, culture, belief, art, and social media in order to have wealth flow from the S&P 500 to the S&P 6900. And it's essentially a way to have some of the wealth to flow from this giant bucket to this smaller bucket, predominantly controlled and owned by young people. And this sounds crazy, but I think you're going to see more things like this in the future, which is essentially a way of people to vote with their money and to come together to not only critique the current state of affairs, but to potentially achieve financial freedom as well.
Is there a real tangible connection between S&P 500 and SPX 6900? I mean, is there anything that when you mentioned that money is flowing out of this old world vehicle?
Is there a real tangible connection between BTC and gold? Or BTC and the dollar?
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
It's a narrative in the end. Yeah, but I mean, tell me about the narrative, because I feel like I'm right with you on this. You know, everything is sort of Ponzonomics in the end. You know, if we even go to pension fund system run by government, you know, they have this story that they need to you know, fill in the gap for older people, you know, but you to eventually run it indefinitely, you always need new people being born, you know, and if people are not born anymore, you get immigrants that come into the country to have the flywheel going. With Bitcoin, it's really, you know, you have it's this digital gold, anti-inflationary trade. With Ethereum, it's maybe like tokenize the entire world, you know, Fiat 2.0, it's going to run on Ethereum. What is the one sentence narrative then with SPX 6900, you know, like that really clicks with people?
Yeah. So SPX 6900 is trying to flip the stock market. That is the one sentence narrative, right? Now, I know what you're thinking. This is completely insane. The S&P 500 is 58 trillion in market cap. How is this possible? But really, it's a clever post-nihilistic and post-ironic and postmodernist way of essentially, like I said, combining social media. And by the way, you have to understand the context here, right? Young people, they don't have much money, they don't have much houses, they don't have much political power, but what they are good at is social media. And that is the rails in which we can succeed. And so the goal of SPX 6900 is to build a vehicle that one way or another attracts wealth, attracts believers, attracts buyers, and that goes to these very extremely high valuations, right? Our goal is to reach a market cap of 69 trillion, which is extremely ambitious. Now, even if you don't believe me, and you think this is insane, this is crazy, this is stupid, and even if you're cynical, let's say we only reach 10% of that target. Or if we only reach 1% of that target, right? Now we're talking about 500 billion. Still a huge success in my point of view, right? Even if we go to 0.1%, which is 58 billion, still a huge success in my point of view, right? And I think that when you get to those numbers, it's starting to sound a lot less crazy than it is, right? So my view is that crypto has always been UBI, but for people that actually believe in the right coins. And it's essentially a way of people to build alternative systems of value and alternative systems of wealth redistribution. And you asked me how a coin can actually achieve this. I think the goal is to reach normal people. So it's things like YouTube, Reddit, TikTok, etc. The coins that manage to go viral there and to manage to get a lot of believers from there, those are the coins that are going to do extremely well.
Yes, I see. Okay. I'm just trying to wrap my head around, if like flipping the stock market, if this is going to tell anything to normal people in that sense, is like, is it strong enough of a narrative? Like, can they really picture something flipping the stock market? But maybe it's people that have never really participated in the stock market and believe like, okay, this boat has sailed for me, and now I need a new vehicle, and that's why it sort of resonates with them. Because like I mentioned to you in the beginning, I'm from Switzerland. A lot of my friends over here, we're still living in some type of bubble, and feel like we have the privilege to participate in traditional equity markets, and so it might not resonate with me that much as with other people who might not have this possibility. But yeah, it's an interesting take for sure.
You know, in 2015 and 2016, a lot of my friends from, wealthy first world backgrounds, they would tell me, I don't need BTC. My wealth manager, my private banker, can wire my money, from JP Morgan private banking to my friends anywhere in the world. I don't have any issues. I have financial advisors. But the thing is that Switzerland has the third or fourth highest, actually, it has the first highest wealth per capita. And I think the third or fourth highest purchasing power per capita as well, right? So I think in your case, yes, you're coming from a position of privilege. I think a country with high levels of financial security, high levels of safety, high levels of economic growth and financial freedoms, relatively speaking. But that does not explain, 99% of the world, right? And so I think there are plenty of people that are going to resonate with this. There are several other angles to all this. You mentioned earlier how there's going to be a crisis of meaning. I 100% agree with you. With AI replacing jobs and with levels of, religious belief constantly going down all over the world, people are becoming increasingly nihilistic, increasingly, not believing really in anything, not having any core goal, not having any core mission. And something like this is not just about money or finance. Something like this is a way kind of for people to, find community, find a mission, find meaning, and participate in something cool, and participate in once in a lifetime socio-cultural phenomenon, right? And I think that something like this has a tremendous amount of value, because at first glance, it sounds very kind of nebulous. But in reality, a lot of people ask or actually debate, in VC circles on crypto Twitter, a lot of people say, what are the biggest markets in the world? And people say, oh, it's like food, or it's transport, or it's energy, or it's compute. But in my opinion, one of the biggest markets in the world is actually the market for reducing psychological suffering, right? Now, what do I mean by this? There's actually many examples of this, but it's very clustered, right? It used to be things like churches, things like community clubs, things like private memberships clubs, things like yoga clubs, gyms, wellness centers, any kind of third space where people get together, right? Now, some of these things have been on the decline, and a lot of it has been moving online. I would even go as far as to argue that some of these are going to get financialized or tokenized, because the way I see it is hyper-financialization is this omnipresent, omnipotent mega trend. It's almost like an octopus that's invisible, and it's kind of putting its tentacles everywhere it can. And I think the next frontier is not tokenizing the tangible and putting it on chain like real estate, bonds, stocks, etc., but it's actually tokenization of the intangible. Things like community, spirituality, pure concept, pure ideas, pure ideology, and even tokenizing belief and faith itself. Now, the coins that are going to succeed in doing what I'm describing, they're going to win tremendously, right? If you succeed in building a cult, if you succeed in building a movement, if you succeed in building a neo-religion that has a token, these things are going to be fighting for a multi-trillion-dollar market, in my opinion. And that's what a lot of people misunderstand about how big this potential actually is. And in a world where automation is going to take not only people's incomes, but also people's identities about who they are and what they do and what their mission on earth is, things like that will become incredibly attractive.
Where do you see yourself in all of this? Because like, again, for somebody looking at this and hearing you speak, it sounds convincing. But that person who's maybe again a normie and is not affiliated with anything of this, might be hearing a guru speaking. Somebody who wants to form a new religion, a new movement around on-chain spirituality. Yeah, how do you see yourself? What's your position in all of this?
Yeah, I don't want to be a leader. I just want to be someone that contributes. I think it's much better if something like this is decentralized and distributed. And I think that my importance in all of this will gradually diminish as the market cap becomes bigger.
You think so? Because in the end, I mean, it's perception is reality, and I guess a lot of people are sort of seeing you as this cult leader, and because it's just recent days, this screenshot. I don't know if it's true. It has been floating around on X again. Murad's meme coin investment portfolio dropping to 20 something millions from over 70 million, and so I mean, a lot of people have their eyes focused on you, and consider you to be a legend, consider you to be visionary in that sense, and maybe even their cult leader. So, are you sure that your sort of importance will decline, and why is that?
Yeah, I mean, my importance is still somewhat important right now in the sense that I want to set a good example and to show people that to truly win in crypto, you need to diamond hand, you need to hodl for as long as you can, and you need to really believe in something, right? But I think once we reach the targets that I believe in, like 100 billion, 200 billion, at that point, my personal influence and my personal importance will be way smaller. And my vision for this is to become not a top down thing, but really more like a murmuration of birds, which is 100% emergent and decentralized and organic and bottom up rather than something with a leader.
And what do you say to people? I mean, Bitcoin has the same problem nowadays, with Saylor, Michael Saylor being like this cult leader almost, and people are afraid, especially again, people, normies who are maybe not that much into the weeds. They're like, okay, what if Saylor leaves all of a sudden, dies, maybe sells his Bitcoin? You never know. He's human in the end. Like, yeah, how can we mitigate such problems? I mean, it's in the meme coin space, it might be some people who are sort of afraid of Murad selling at some point, and just turning it back to this industry as such. So, how do you alleviate these sort of concerns as well?
I think Sailor is good for BTC. And I think that the price of BTC would be lower if Sailor never arrived. And if Sailor didn't arrive, then someone else would be doing something similar and also running something similar to the DAT playbook also. Things like that are inevitable. Someone needs to step up and kind of show the world what's possible and show the world like what things are available and kind of be the core cheerleader of the asset or the movement. This is just the way things work. But ultimately, in my opinion, if BTC reaches, our $100 trillion targets that we believe in, no one is really going to be caring about Sailor at that point. He's just going to be running the next JP Morgan.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I think Murad, we've gone almost an hour, so thanks a lot for sharing your opinion again. Any last things you want to say, and maybe just what do you think will happen to crypto until the end of the year? Are we still going through this consolidation phase, and we will only take off once liquidity comes back, or how do you view the markets currently?
I think we need to digest people that are selling because of the 4-year cycle. And with the current price action, I understand that it's a little bit reflexive. The further down BTC goes here locally, the more people are going to be like, oh, like the 4-year cycle happened again. It's crazy. I personally think that this cycle will generally last longer than people think. I wouldn't be surprised if it was a 4.5, even a 5-year cycle, and potentially even longer. But we need to digest the 4-year cycle believers. And once we do, I think we're going to go much higher after that. But I remain bullish for the foreseeable months.
Yes. Great to know. Yeah, thanks a lot. And yeah, if you ever come to Switzerland, let us know. Then it would be interesting to meet in person at some point.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And thanks for having me.
Yes, thanks. Have a good one. Bye, Murad.